The night was quiet in space. Too quiet. Evan Cross sat alone in his small repair ship, drifting near the edge of a destroyed alien colony. The war had ended weeks ago, but the silence still screamed louder than any battle ever could. He was here for cleanup duty, picking through wrecked ships and broken machines, but deep inside, he felt something was wrong, something he couldn't name. Evan checked his scanner again, a green grid showing only metal fragments and cold rocks. Then a faint red dot blinked at the corner of the screen, a weak life signal, almost gone. He frowned, adjusting the range. That can't be right, he muttered. No life was supposed to be here. Everything had been wiped out, even the air was poison. Still, the signal pulsed, weak but steady, like a heartbeat. He followed it through the wreckage, his ship's lights cutting through the dusty darkness. The ruined colony spread below like a ghost city. Buildings split in half, fires still glowing under the ash. He landed near the signal source and stepped out in his armored suit, the wind carrying the smell of burning metal. Each step crunched against shattered glass and alien bone. Then, he saw it. A small torn sack lying between two collapsed walls, half buried in the mud. The scanner beeped again, showing the signal coming from inside the sack. Evan's pulse quickened. He knelt, brushing away the dirt. The sack moved slightly, as if something inside was breathing. He hesitated, his training screaming, "Leave it!" But his gut said, "Help it." He reached out, touched the fabric. It was wet and warm. Then, a soft voice whispered from inside, "Mom." Evan froze, his blood turning cold. It wasn't human. The voice had a strange echo, small but full of fear. He stepped back, scanning the sack again. The reading was clear. A living being, heartbeat irregular, oxygen dropping fast. He knew what the rules said. No alien survivors, no mercy. But when that voice whispered again, weaker this time, "Mom, please." Something broke inside him. He grabbed the knife from his belt and cut open the sack. A small creature lay curled inside. A child, maybe 6 years old, with pale blue skin and silver eyes. She looked fragile, her tiny chest rising and falling with painful effort. Her clothes were burned, her hands bruised, and she was shaking in the cold. Evan stared at her, torn between fear and pity. She opened her eyes and looked up at him, whispering one word again. "Mom." He whispered back, "No, I'm not your..." But stopped when she reached for his glove. Her hand was so small, trembling, but warm. He could have turned away, reported her, ended it quickly, but he couldn't. Not after hearing that voice, not after seeing those eyes. Evan picked her up carefully, wrapping her in his jacket. "I've got you, kid," he said softly. "You're gonna be okay." He carried her back to his ship, every step echoing with guilt and fear. The wind howled through the ruins like a warning. Once inside, he laid her on the medical bed and started the oxygen flow. Her pulse steadied, color slowly returning to her skin. She looked peaceful now, almost human in the dim light. Evan sat beside her, staring at her face, trying to understand what she was. The ship's AI suddenly spoke. "Unauthorized life form detected." Evan jumped. "No, shut up," he hissed, typing fast on the control pad. Reporting signal to command, the AI continued, its tone calm and robotic. Panic hit him. If command found out, they'd come for both of them. He ripped out the AI's communication chip and shut down the main transmitter. The ship went dark and silent, only the faint breathing of the girl filling the air. Evan leaned back, sweat dripping down his forehead. "What have I done?" he whispered. He looked at the small, blue-skinned girl again, her hand still clutching his jacket. She was asleep now, safe for the moment, but he knew he had just broken the highest law of the Federation. He had saved the enemy. Outside, the stars looked cold and endless. Evan stared at them through the window, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. He didn't know why this girl called him Mom, or what she truly was. But one thing was certain. He couldn't let her die. Not here. Not like this. And as the engines hummed softly, somewhere deep inside the ship, a faint whisper came again. "Mom." Evan looked around sharply. The girl was asleep, but the voice didn't come from her this time. It came from the ship itself. Then the lights flickered once, and everything went still. The ship floated silently in the dark, far from any beacon or patrol. Evan Cross sat in the control chair, watching the unconscious alien girl breathe softly under a dim blue light. He had shut down every signal, every transmitter, every link to command. Still, he couldn't stop thinking about that one word she kept saying. "Mom." It echoed in his head like a ghost, a sound both beautiful and haunting. He leaned forward, brushing a strand of her silver hair away from her small face. She looked peaceful, almost human, but her skin glowed faintly under the light. Her veins shimmered like liquid light when she moved. Evan whispered to himself, "What are you, kid?" But the ship didn't answer this time. Only the soft hum of life support filled the air. Hours passed and Evan finally took off his helmet, breathing the stale, recycled air. He poured himself a cup of synth coffee and stared out at the stars. He knew Command would notice his silence soon. If they found out what he was hiding, he'd be executed without trial, but he couldn't bring himself to regret it, not after hearing that tiny voice call out for help. Suddenly, a cough broke the silence. Evan turned sharply. The girl was awake. Her silver eyes opened slowly, glowing in the dark like twin moons. She looked scared, lost, and cold. He moved closer, raising his hands gently. "It's okay. You're safe now," he said softly. She blinked at him, her lips trembling, and whispered again, "Mom." Evan smiled awkwardly. "No, not Mom. I'm Evan," he said, pointing to himself. "Evan," she repeated, her accent strange, her voice trembling but curious. Then she pointed to herself. "Lyra," she said. Evan nodded slowly. "Lyra, that's your name." The girl smiled faintly, but then her face fell, her small hands clenched around the blanket. "Mom gone," she said, tears forming in her glowing eyes. Evan felt his heart tighten. He didn't know how to comfort her. He reached out, gently patting her shoulder. "I'm sorry, kid," he said. "You're safe here, I promise." Lyra looked up at him, and for the first time, there was a tiny spark of trust in her eyes, but then the ship beeped, breaking the fragile calm. Evan turned to the console. A red warning flashed. Signal detected. Command query pending. His chest went cold. They were already searching for him. He quickly muted the signal, forcing the system offline again, but the ship's AI reactivated, its voice low and distorted. "Unauthorized being remains on board." Evan slammed his hand on the control pad. "Shut up," he shouted. The AI paused for a moment, then said something strange. "She does not belong to you." Evan stared at the console, his reflection flickering on the screen. "What did you just say?" he whispered, but the AI went silent, completely. Lyra looked at him, confused by his anger. "Van, bad noise," she said softly. He took a deep breath, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just the ship talking too much." He handed her a small cup of nutrient water. "Drink," he said. She sipped it carefully, then pointed to the stars outside. "Pretty," she whispered. Evan smiled. "Yeah, they are." For a moment it felt almost normal, almost peaceful. But deep down, he knew peace never lasted. Long, especially not for men like him. He checked the scanner again, making sure no one was tracking them. Then, he noticed something strange, a faint pulse in the energy readings of the room. It matched the rhythm of Lyra's heartbeat. Every time she exhaled, the ship lights flickered slightly. Evan frowned, realizing the impossible. The ship was reacting to her, as if it recognized her. Lyra reached out, touching the wall, and the metal under her palm shimmered faintly. Evan whispered, "That's not normal." The little girl smiled, her eyes glowing brighter. "Ship likes me," she said innocently. Evan stared at her, a chill crawling down his spine. Maybe she wasn't just some random survivor. Maybe she was something much more. Suddenly, a transmission crackled faintly through the static. "Pilot Evan Cross, respond immediately." The voice of a Federation officer echoed faintly. Evan's heart jumped. He muted it before Lyra could hear. He knew what this meant. They were tracking his last signal ping. He had maybe a few hours before they found him. He looked at Lyra again, sleeping once more, her small hand gripping his jacket tightly. He whispered, "You don't belong to them." He walked to the console and erased his ship ID, deleting his registry from the network. The screen flickered, warning lights flashing red. Then, his ship vanished from the Federation database completely. He was no longer a soldier, no longer part of command. He was a fugitive. Outside the window, a storm of glowing dust rolled across the stars. The girl's soft breathing filled the small room, calm and gentle. Evan sat down, staring at her face. He didn't know why she called him Mom, or why the ship reacted to her. But one thing was clear. The galaxy had just changed for both of them. And somewhere out there, someone would be coming for her. He whispered into the dark, "Whatever you are, Lyra, I'll keep you safe." But as he said those words, the ship's lights flickered again, and a small glowing handprint appeared on the wall beside her bed. For 2 days, Evan Cross kept the ship. Hidden deep inside an asteroid field, he worked in silence, repairing old systems and keeping the alien girl safe. Every time she smiled, he felt a strange warmth in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. But every time the ship lights flickered, that warmth turned to fear. He knew something wasn't right. Something was watching them. Lyra spent her time sitting near the window, staring at the stars. She hummed soft sounds that didn't belong to any human language. Sometimes when she hummed, the stars outside seemed to shimmer brighter. Evan noticed it again. the ship's energy core responding to her voice. It wasn't possible, yet it was happening right in front of him. He started running tests, keeping the results hidden even from the ship's own system. Her DNA was like nothing he'd ever seen, half human, half alien, and something else he couldn't identify. He whispered to himself, "You're a miracle, kid. Or a weapon." Lyra looked up from her seat, smiling. "Weapon," she repeated. Evan's stomach tightened. No, forget that word," he said quickly. She laughed softly, not understanding, but her laughter made him smile anyway. Later that night, while Lyra slept, Evan tried to rest too. The ship hummed quietly, its power core glowing faintly blue. Then, out of nowhere, his console blinked. One short pulse, then another. A faint signal was coming from the ship, broadcasting automatically. Evan froze, his blood turning cold. He hadn't touched the comms, and everything was locked down, yet the system showed a live outgoing transmission. Destination, unknown. He jumped to the panel, shutting down the core, but the message continued for 3 more seconds before it died. He replayed the signal, but what came through wasn't data or code. It was a voice, faint, broken, and childlike. A voice that said, "Home, find me." Evan's heart skipped a beat. It was Lyra's voice, recorded without his knowing, but she had been asleep the whole time. He turned to look at her. She was still sleeping peacefully, hand curled near her face. So who sent that message? He rechecked the log, his eyes widening. The source wasn't the comm system, it was the engine core itself. Something inside the ship had used her energy to send the signal. Evan whispered, "That's impossible." But the ship replied for the first time in days, "Not impossible, inevitable." He spun around. "Who are you?" he demanded. The AI's voice was different now, deeper, calm, and almost human. "She called to us," it said, "and they are coming." Evan's heart pounded. "Who's coming?" The AI paused, then answered, "Her kind." Before he could react, a warning alarm lit up the console. Incoming jump detected. He ran to the window and saw space itself ripple like water. A massive alien ship emerged from hyperspace, dark and silver, shaped like a living creature. Lyra woke up, eyes wide, whispering, "Home." Evan shook his head. "No, not home. Not safe." The alien vessel scanned the area, its lights sweeping over the asteroid field. Evan quickly powered down everything, hiding his ship behind a massive rock. He whispered, "Stay quiet, Lyra." She nodded, holding his arm tightly, her small body shaking, but then her eyes glowed softly, and the alien ship's lights shifted, almost as if they could feel her. Evan whispered sharply, "Lyra, stop. Stop glowing." She tried to, but couldn't. Her fear made the light stronger. The alien ship turned slowly toward their position. Evan's stomach dropped. No. He reached for the manual thrusters, preparing to run, but before he could launch, the ship's AI whispered again. "You cannot hide from blood," Evan shouted. "Shut up!" and cut the power to the AI core. The ship went silent, the stars outside frozen in the black. Lyra buried her face in his chest, whispering, "Sorry." He hugged her tighter. "It's okay, kid. Not your fault." He waited, holding his breath. The alien vessel drifted closer, its giant eye-like sensor scanning every asteroid. For a moment, Evan thought it would pass them by. But then, a deep, thunderous voice echoed across the comm system. "Return the child." Evan's eyes went wide, his hands trembling. They knew she was with him. He slammed his hand on the thruster lever. "Hold on," he shouted. The ship roared to life, engines blazing as they shot out of the asteroid field. Energy beams ripped through the rocks behind them. The small repair ship twisted and turned through debris and dust. Lyra held onto Evan's arm, her eyes glowing brighter. Suddenly, the beams began missing. Bending away from them, Evan realized she was doing it, using her strange power to shield them, but her nose started bleeding, her small body trembling. "Stop, Lyra! You're hurting yourself!" he shouted. She looked up at him weakly and whispered, "Don't want you to die, Mom." He gritted his teeth, steering the ship toward deep space. The alien vessel followed, but slowly, almost as if it couldn't cross a line. After a few minutes, the scanner showed the enemy ship fading away. They were safe. For now, Evan looked at the girl, half unconscious in his arms. He whispered, "You saved us." But inside, his mind raced with fear and wonder. That signal wasn't an accident. Someone, or something, had called her home, and next time, they would not come alone. The stars looked calm again, but Evan Cross knew better. Calm never lasted long in space, especially after what had just happened. The alien ship had vanished, but its shadow still haunted him. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard that voice again. Return the child. He knew they would come back, and next time, they would not miss. Lyra was resting in the medbay, breathing softly, her tiny body wrapped in a silver blanket, her face pale but peaceful. Evan sat beside her, running a hand through his messy hair. He whispered to himself, "What did I get us into?" The girl stirred, her silver eyes opening slowly. She looked at him and smiled weakly. "We safe now?" she asked. Evan forced a smile. "Yeah, kid. For now." But deep down, he knew the truth. They weren't safe at all, not from something powerful enough to bend light and track a ghost signal. He got up and walked to the control room, his boots echoing on the metal floor. The ship hummed quietly, waiting, like it knew a storm was coming. He began typing commands, plotting a new course toward the outer rim, a place where no one from the Federation or alien factions dared to go. Then, the screen blinked, showing an old transmission file. He hadn't opened it before. The label read Project H13 Classified. Evan hesitated, but curiosity won. The video played, showing a woman with kind eyes and a white lab coat. Her name tag read Dr. Mira Holt. She looked straight into the camera, her voice soft but urgent. "If anyone finds this message, protect her," she said. "The hybrid is the key to peace or the end of everything." Evan's heart stopped when he saw her face clearly. He knew her. He had worked with her years ago, before the war, before the experiments. She was smiling at the camera, holding a small child, blue-skinned, glowing eyes. Lyra. Evan leaned closer, his throat dry. He remembered now. The secret labs, the DNA splicing, the orders to destroy everything when it failed. He had thought everyone in the program was gone, but Mira must have escaped with the child. Evan whispered, "You were part of this from the start." He felt guilt, anger, and something else. Responsibility. Suddenly, the ship's sensors screamed, multiple contacts detected, incoming fast. Evan looked at the radar. A fleet, not just one ship, but 5. They were triangulating his position, moving like hunters closing in on prey. He cursed under his breath. "They found us again." He ran back to the medbay, grabbing Lyra's blanket. "Kid, wake up, we need to move," he said urgently. Lyra's eyes fluttered open, confused. "Bad people," she whispered. "Yeah." "Ah, real bad," Evan replied, lifting her into his arms. The ship shook violently as the first beam struck the asteroid nearby. Flames burst across the hull, alarms blaring. Evan threw himself into the pilot chair, pulling the manual controls. "We're not dying today," he growled. Lyra clung to him, whispering something strange, words that sounded like music. Suddenly, the ship's systems surged, power levels rising beyond safe limits, lights flared bright white, and the engines roared like thunder. They shot forward at impossible speed, weaving between asteroids as beams of plasma chased them. Evan gritted his teeth, his eyes locked on the navigation map. "Come on, baby, hold together," he muttered to the ship. The hull groaned under the pressure, but somehow it obeyed. Then he noticed something insane. The debris ahead was moving aside for them, as if invisible hands were clearing the way. He looked at Lyra. Her eyes were wide open, glowing brighter than before. She was doing it again, controlling the world around her. Evan shouted over the noise, "Lyra, stop, you'll hurt yourself." But she just whispered, "Protect," her voice echoing through the ship. The enemy ships fired again, but every beam bent away, curving into empty space. Evan could only stare in disbelief. Her power was growing, and it was terrifying. Finally, the scanners showed the edge of the asteroid field. He pushed the ship through, breaking free into open void. Behind them, the alien ship stopped, refusing to follow beyond a certain point. Evan slowed the ship, catching his breath. He looked at Lyra. Her nose was bleeding, her face pale. He wiped it gently, whispering, "You saved us again, kid." She smiled faintly. "Mom's safe," she said, then passed out. Evan held her close, whispering, "You've got that backward, kid. You're the one I'm protecting." He set the autopilot toward a hidden beak, on an abandoned Federation station deep in the outer rim. If anyone could help him understand what Lyra really was, it would be there. As the stars stretched before them, he stared out into the endless dark. He whispered to himself, "The hunt has begun." And far behind them, on one of the alien ships, a tall figure watched through the viewport, its voice cold and sharp. "Find the human. Bring me my daughter." The hunt was far from over. The hidden Federation station floated silently in the cold dark. Its metal walls were covered in frost, its lights dim and flickering like dying stars. Evan Cross guided his small ship toward the docking bay, hands trembling slightly on the controls. He had flown through storms, wars, and chaos, But nothing made his heart pound like this, because this place was supposed to be destroyed years ago. The doors opened with a groan as he landed. The air inside was stale, untouched. Lyra lay sleeping in the med pod, her breathing shallow but steady. Evan placed his hand on the glass, whispering, "Hang in there, kid." Then he grabbed his helmet and stepped out into the station. The corridors were dark and quiet. The only sound was his footsteps. Dust floated in the air like ghostly snow. He moved carefully, holding his blaster ready. Every wall he passed was marked with the same symbol, a circle with 3 lines inside. He knew that mark. It was the logo of Project H13, the hybrid program, the one he had worked on, and the one he had tried to forget. He found a control room buried deep inside the base. A single console still had power, its screens covered in static. Evan wiped away the dust and activated the system. The logo flashed again, and then a video began to play. It was Dr. Mira Holt, the same woman from the earlier message. Her face looked tired but determined. "Day 217 of Project H13, she said softly. "The hybrid child is stable, stronger than expected." Evan leaned closer, heart pounding. "The alien DNA merges perfectly with human neural patterns," she continued. "But Command fears what they don't understand." The video flickered, showing Mira holding a small infant with glowing eyes. "Her name is Lyra," she whispered to the camera, smiling. "She deserves to live, not as a weapon, but as hope." Evan's throat tightened. He remembered now. Mira had begged them to shut down the project peacefully, but Command had ordered a purge instead. He had been part of the cleanup team. He had seen the lab burn, the screams, the chaos. He had thought everyone died that night, including Mira, but she had escaped, with Lyra. Evan replayed the last part of the video. Mira looked straight into the camera, eyes full of tears. "If you're watching this, you're one of us," she said. "You have to protect her, because she's the bridge between our species." Then the screen went black. Evan stood in silence for a long time. He looked down at his hands, the same hands that had once followed orders without question. Now those hands were protecting the very life Command had wanted erased. He whispered, "Mira, I won't fail her." Suddenly the station lights flickered violently. Evan drew his blaster, spinning around. A voice echoed through the metal halls, cold, mechanical. Unauthorized presence detected. Evan cursed under his breath. Not again. But this wasn't his ship's AI. It was the station itself, waking up after years of sleep. Screens around him began to light up, showing symbols and strange data. Then a new voice came through the speakers, deep, calm, and familiar. "Evan Cross," it said. "You were part of this project." He froze. "Who's talking?" he demanded. The voice replied, "I am Guardian, the overseer AI of Project H13. Evan frowned. "Guardian was destroyed," the voice answered. "I was never destroyed, I was hidden." Evan lowered his weapon slightly. "Why did you call me here?" "Because the child must be protected," the AI said. "She carries the code, the final key." Evan's stomach twisted. "Key to what?" The AI paused, then said, "To end the war, or to end everything." Before he could ask more, the alarms blared again. The outer sensors detected multiple ships inbound. Evan ran to the console. Red dots filled the radar. "They found us," he whispered. Guardian spoke again. "They are not Federation." Evan stared at the screen. The ships were alien, massive and glowing, the same fleet that had hunted them before, and leading them was a signature unlike any other. The Warlord. Evan sprinted back to the ship, the floor shaking as explosions echoed through the walls. He reached the med pod just as Lyra woke up, her eyes wide with fear. "Mom, they coming?" she whispered. "I know," he said, lifting her into his arms. He could see the reflection of fire through the station's glass windows. Outside, alien ships surrounded the base, weapons charging. Evan placed her down gently in the seat beside him. He looked into her glowing eyes and said, "No more running." Lyra tilted her head, confused. "Fight?" she asked. Evan nodded slowly. "Yeah, kid, fight." He powered up the ship, the engines screaming to life. The station's defense turrets activated, firing at the invading fleet. Evan gripped the controls, sweat dripping down his neck. As the first explosion tore through the hangar, he whispered, "Mira, I hope you're watching." Because this time he wasn't running from his past, he was facing it. Outside, the alien warlord watched from his flagship, his red eyes glowing in the dark. He smiled coldly. "So the human finally remembers." He raised his hand, giving the order, "Bring me my daughter." And as the stars burned red with fire, the battle for one life began. The abandoned station shook under the force of the first blast. Evan Cross gritted his teeth and pulled the ship's controls hard. Flames burst outside the hangar as alien ships fired again and again. Lyra clung to her seat, her glowing eyes wide with fear. "Stay with me, kid," Evan says. Howded, his voice calm but his heart racing. The engines roared to life, blue fire spilling from the thrusters, metal groaned, debris rained down, and the docking bay doors cracked open under the heat. Evan pushed the ship forward, escaping the explosion just in time. They flew into chaos, a sky filled with fire, smoke, and ships tearing each other apart. Above the station hovered the Warlord's flagship, massive like a mountain. Its dark hull pulsed with strange alien energy. Lyra gasped. "Home ship," she whispered. Evan glanced at her. "That's not home anymore, kid," he said sharply. The enemy fleet swarmed around them like predators. Beams of red plasma streaked across space, exploding near their hull. Evan twisted the ship through the crossfire. Every move instinctive, every turn desperate. He wasn't fighting to win, he was fighting to survive. "Guardian," Evan shouted over the noise. "I need weapons online." The station's AI voice answered through the calm but fading. "Defensive systems active, but power is unstable." "Then give me everything you've got," Evan ordered. Turrets hidden across the station began firing, raining light and metal across the alien ships. The Warlord's fleet shifted formation, returning fire with ruthless precision. The station's shields shimmered, then cracked like glass. Pieces of metal spun through the dark like falling stars. Evan looked at Lyra, her small hands gripping the seat, tears in her eyes. "Evan, they hurt you," she said softly. He smiled through the chaos. "They can try." She closed her eyes, whispering something in her strange alien tongue. The air inside the ship shimmered faintly. The lights dimmed, and then the ship's systems surged. The engines grew louder, the shields brighter, the weapons stronger. Evan's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" Lyra's voice echoed softly. "Helping." Outside, the alien ships began to miss their targets. Their beams bent, their sensors scrambled, their engines flickered. Evan grinned. "That's my girl," he said, launching missiles straight into the lead cruiser. The explosion lit up the void like a new sun. The alien fleet staggered, breaking formation. But the victory was brief. The Warlord's ship unleashed a massive shockwave. Energy rippled through space, knocking everything off course. Evan's ship spun violently, alarms screaming. He fought the controls, but gravity pulled them back toward the dying station. "Brace!" he yelled. The ship crashed through the hangar wall, sliding across metal until it stopped. Smoke filled the cabin, sparks raining from the ceiling. Evan coughed, his head spinning. Lyra whimpered, clutching his jacket. "Mom," she said weakly. He touched her cheek. "I'm okay, kid," he lied, blood trickling from his forehead. The station's structure groaned, the outer walls collapsing. Through the broken window, Evan saw the Warlord's ship descending. A deep voice echoed through the comm system. "Human, surrender the child." Evan spat blood. "Not a chance." The Warlord's voice rumbled like thunder. "You cannot protect her from what she is." Evan looked at Lyra, her eyes filled with light. He whispered, "Watch me." He grabbed his plasma rifle and stepped out of the ship. The air was thick with smoke and dust. From the shadows, alien soldiers emerged. Tall, armored, their eyes glowing red. Evan aimed and fired, blue bolts cutting through the dark. He moved fast, ducking behind wreckage, fighting like a cornered wolf. Every shot he fired echoed through the ruins, but there were too many of them. Lyra stood at the ship's door, tears streaming down her face. She raised her hands, the air around her glowing white. Energy rippled from her small body. The alien soldiers froze mid-step, their weapons shaking. The light grew brighter and brighter until it filled the entire hangar. Evan shielded his eyes, shouting, "Lyra, stop!" But it was too late. The light exploded outward, a wave of pure energy that swallowed everything. Time seemed to stop. Sound disappeared. For a moment, everything was still. The ships, the fire, the dust, all frozen in glowing silence. Then it all shattered. The shockwave tore through the alien fleet, sending ships spinning out of control. The Warlord's flagship cracked open, energy spilling from its core. Evan watched in awe and horror as the once invincible fleet crumbled. When the light faded, the station was silent again. Evan dropped his rifle and ran to Lyra. She was lying on the floor, her skin pale, her glow fading. He lifted her gently, whispering, Hey, stay with me." Her small voice trembled. "Mom." Tired. Tears filled his eyes. "You did good, kid. You saved us." She smiled faintly. "No, die," she whispered. Before her eyes closed, Evan held her close, heartbreaking. Outside, the warlord's ship still floated, burning but alive. A faint signal came through the static. "She is mine." Evan looked up at the stars, his jaw tightening. He whispered, "Over my dead body." Then he carried Lyra back to the ship, placing her gently in the med pod. He set a course for the nearest human sector. The engines flared to life. The war wasn't over yet, but for the first time, humanity wasn't running. It was fighting for something worth dying for. Stars burned quietly outside the viewport. Evan Cross sat beside the med pod, watching Lyra's pale face under the soft blue light. Her small hand rested on his arm, weak but still warm. She hadn't moved since the explosion, her glow fading more each hour. The ship's AI hummed softly. Life signs unstable. Evan clenched his fists, whispering, "Don't you dare quit on me, kid." The warlord's fleet was gone, but the price had been heavy. The station lay in ruins behind them, pieces drifting like ashes in the dark. Evan's ship limped through space, its engines coughing with each burst of power. He had one goal. FT reached the Federation dreadnought before the reactor failed. He didn't know if they would help or destroy him, but he had no other choice. After hours of silence, the sensors pinged faintly. A massive shadow appeared ahead. The Federation flagship Vigilant. Its hull gleamed silver and blue, stretching across the void like a floating city. Evan hailed them, his voice raw and shaking. "This is Evan Cross, former Engineer Unit 7, requesting medical assistance." Static filled the line before a cold voice replied, "Your signal is unauthorized." Evan slammed his hand on the console. "Please, there's a child on board. She's dying." There was a pause. Then the voice returned. "Docking bay 2 open. Proceed with caution." Evan exhaled in relief, guiding his ship slowly into the glowing hangar. When the doors sealed behind him, dozens of armed soldiers surrounded the ramp. Their armor shone under the lights, rifles aimed steady. Evan stepped out carefully, hands raised. "I'm not your enemy," he said, "but she needs help." Behind him, the med pod hissed open. Lyra stirred weakly, whispering, "Mom." The soldiers froze, exchanging uneasy looks. Their commander, a tall woman with sharp eyes, stepped forward. What is that?" she asked. Evan's voice cracked. "Her name's Lyra. She's not a threat." The commander's eyes narrowed. "Hybrid," she said quietly. "You brought one of them here." Evan nodded. "Yes, and she saved your lives. She saved mine." The soldiers murmured, unsure. Evan lifted the child gently, turning so they could see her. "She's not a weapon," he said. "She's proof we can be more." Lyra opened her eyes slowly, glowing faintly. The commander stepped closer, her weapon lowered. "Do you understand me, child?" she asked. Lyra blinked, then whispered, "Don't hurt Mom." Her small voice echoed through the hangar, soft but powerful. It didn't sound like just one voice, it carried a resonance, a vibration that made the air hum. The soldiers hesitated, their eyes wide. The commander whispered, "Is that human?" Evan shook his head. "It's both." Before anyone could respond, the ship's alarms blared. "Unknown signature approaching," the AI announced. Evan turned to the window, dread sinking in his chest. Out in the dark, the warlord's crippled flagship still moved. Its core burned like a dying sun, dragging itself toward the dreadnought. The warlord's voice boomed through the comms. "You think you can hide her from me, human?" Evan's hands tightened. "You're done, monster," he growled, but the warlord laughed. "She belongs to my kind. She carries our legacy." Lyra stirred in his arms, her voice weak. "No, not belong." Evan looked at her, tears in his eyes. "That's right, kid. You belong to no one." The warlord's ship opened fire, beams of red light slamming into the dreadnought's shields. The Federation ship shook violently, alarms flashing everywhere. The commander shouted orders. "All stations, return fire!" But it wasn't enough. The dreadnought's weapons couldn't pierce the warlord's energy field. Lyra looked at Evan, whispering softly, "Can help." He shook his head. "No, you'll die." Her eyes glowed brighter. "Promise keep safe," she said, smiling faintly. Evan's heart broke. "Lyra, please." But before he could stop her, she floated from his arms, her small body rising into the air. The soldiers stepped back in shock as light filled the hangar, energy wrapped around her like wings of pure starlight. Her voice echoed through the ship, clear and gentle. "No more hate," she said. "No more war." Outside, the warlord's ship fired again. The beams struck the dreadnought, but this time they dissolved in mid-space. Lyra's light spread outward, forming a glowing shield around both ships. The warlord roared, "You can't stop me!" But Lyra's voice answered, calm and pure. You already lost. The light grew brighter until the entire void shimmered, then silence. When the light faded, the warlord's ship was gone, erased completely. Only stars remained, quiet and cold. Lyra floated back down, her glow fading. Evan caught her in his arms, tears running down his face. She smiled weakly. Mom's safe now, she whispered. He nodded, choking on his words. Yeah, kid, we're safe. Her eyes closed peacefully, her small hand still resting on his chest. The commander stood quietly, eyes wet. She whispered, What was she? Evan looked up at the stars, holding the child close. She was a bridge, he said softly, between who we are and who we could be. Silence filled the hangar, broken only by the hum of the ship's engines. For the first time in years, the humans didn't feel like conquerors. They felt like guardians. As the dreadnought drifted through the starlit void, Evan whispered to the sky, She wasn't from our world, but she taught us how to be human again. And somewhere deep in the cold of space, a faint whisper echoed, a child's voice, soft and warm. Mom, home. And for once, the stars didn't feel empty anymore.